a fall day in 2019, a month short of his passing. Jimmy Collier, the man we used to call Martin Luther King's opening act, picked up his guitar in his music room and sang his last spiritual. That guitar had been his friend and his weapon of choice through a turbulent time, a time when the struggle for human rights really began to bubble up. Brings to mind the words of that old Scottish song read by the one and only Faith Patrick.
Hallelujah.
He holds his guitar like a revolutionary banner. He sings for the memory of martyrs in chains. He sings for the truth with his eyes set on freedom. He'll sing for us all while injustice remains. So hold fast the line and let's link arms together. We'll sing out our message. We'll fight and stand tall. Here's a song for a world where all people are equal, where there's peace and respect and a fair go for all. Where there's peace and respect and a fair go for all.
Sit at the welcome table. Sit at the welcome table.
Jimmy was not born in the South like so many of the movement his age, but in the Southwest, and he was known for wearing a cowboy hat when he performed. You can see it here in the background.
Come on, do guide my feet with me, John.
Somehow he connected with a man just 2 years younger, but born a world away. Another singer-activist named John Fromer, raised primarily in San Francisco by very progressive Jewish liberal parents, a so-called red diaper baby. They last sang together on January 16, 2012 at the Western Workers Labor Heritage Festival, an annual collection of activists and performers that used to attract people like Pete Seeger and Utah Phillips.
Guide my feet while I'm running straight. Guide my feet while I'm running straight.
Jimmy Collier and John Fromer actually met on the March, Dr. King's third attempt to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge back in 1965 and walk to the Alabama state capitol in Montgomery in the name of voting rights, back when anybody who really cared about civil rights in America just had to be in Selma. After the horrors we'd all seen on TV on Bloody Sunday, Dr. King's first trial. I was there, along with Jimmy and John, and a few people you might have heard of, and a whole lot more just regular folks, white and black. It started on March 21st in the morning as they crossed the Pettus Bridge successfully, and it ended 4 days later on the 25th. Both boys had played and sang along the way and had gotten to know the power of music to move people to act. From that point on, Jimmy and John spent their lives on a bigger march, on that struggle for human rights, on that commitment to doing the right thing, all the time with their guitars on their backs, ready to play. Of course, along the way, they both raised families, had jobs, and provided for those families. They won awards, they traveled the world, they always saw the bigger picture, and most importantly, they were there. They were two men who always showed up, fighting the good fight. They were Jimmy and John, and they were armed with guitars.
Oh, Ryan, oh, no. was me and the grandparents until, and then my mother had 4 more kids, I think. How many more kids? 5 more kids. And they came eventually to live with me and the grandparents. They stopped the trains from coming into town. And I thought, well, they may just make the town so you can't leave. So, but I was into running away from home, and I eventually just did it. I was afraid I would get stuck in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and I didn't want that to happen. And my girlfriend was pregnant, and I was afraid I'd get stuck there in Fort Smith. So when I went to talk to the recruiter, Air Force recruiter, I realized that they thought I was old enough, and I just kept it going. Next thing I know, I'm headed to basic training.
Sure was dark.
I happened to run into the Fromers at the Folk Sings, run by Faith Petrick, back in the days of Malvina Reynolds and Little Boxes on the Hillside. Just wandering around the neighborhood with nothing to do. I spent many Christmas Eves, New Year's Eves, just wandering the neighborhood solo. I'm still moving very solo. So I started going to the folk sings. We would sing, we'd have a good time. Later on, Peter McMinn came through when we were up there at Presidio Hill, where Catherine was a teacher. And this guy wanted to start a music group. So John, Dave, and I started singing together. We sang very well together, but we had absolutely no interest in being a show business personality. We weren't in show business. We were just 3 guys who sang well together. Somebody knew somebody. Suddenly we were in LA in a recording studio with, what's his name? Played great guitar. Glenn Campbell. Right, played great guitar. Went on, had a wonderful career. Our career, like, we were not in show business to make it. We just sang well together. Then our manager there in Chicago, Frank Freed, he didn't put any developmental work into developing what could have been a great talent.
Woke up this morning with
Albert sang, I think he sang at Washington High School,
Yeah, I think
and I could hear him the one time he performed there, and also he'd sing next door, at the folk sings. He loved going to the folk sings, and we used to, around midnight, when the folk music had kind of died down and most people had left, we used to go up on the hill where you look out over all of San Francisco, and that was just a few blocks away from where we were, 885 Clayton, and just up the hill, and then Twin Peaks, going up Twin Peaks, and
Where the album cover was. On that, the picture on the album cover.
We felt a little odd because Peter McMinn had approached us to be our manager, and we didn't really know him very well at all, but we thought this is a step up, a career step up, if we're going to sing together, be a trio maybe. So anyway, he got us connected with the record company. What's the label?
Mercury.
Yeah, Mercury.
Philips Mercury.
Yeah, Philips. Yeah,
But he heard them singing at a folk sing. I mean, that's
Yeah, he heard us singing, and he thought we
it was probably spontaneous singing, but he heard them.
He thought, yeah, that we were special and worth signing. So we signed with him, and then we were together for about half a year to a year or so, and then we kind of separated from him because we discovered that he was taking, well, we had gone down to LA and had some gigs in LA and connected with when we were recording our album and down there. And so, you know, it just seemed like we weren't making the money that we were reputed to be receiving, and Peter McMahon had kind of taken off with a lot of our money.
The Freedom Song Network, I think, evolved because there were people in the we call it East Bay, and there was a whole group of people who wanted to sing together, people who played guitar, people who were singers, and
oftentimes there would be a group of us right in this room.
We had rehearsals at Faith's house. Oh, those were some wonderful sessions.
Yep.
Those are absolutely wonderful. Musicians, people who had same political ideas and passions, and we would bring food. It was a potluck, and we would get together, and sometimes people would bring songs, that they had written. Freedom Song Network has had a lot of talented people in it.
I want to say this, reflecting on her talking about that. She came from a place in the South where the group of anti-racists were very small. It's the same way up here. But this group was very consciously anti-racist. And that was very impressive for a person who was fighting that all the time as a black person, conditioned reflex, as soon as somebody sees you, they go into a different, they're not talking to a human being anymore. So it was a boon to be around white people, quote unquote, who were not always reacting to your color.
About maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they had an event for the 100th anniversary of Presidio Hill School, the one that, as you heard, John's mother was one of the important teachers at. And John had gone there as a kid, but then in his early 20s, he went there and did music for the students there, just like he did at my kindergarten. But as a part of that, I happened to be included, almost inadvertently, in an email chain of some of the former students. And these are guys who are right now, in their early 60s. And they were all talking to each other through email, all communicating with each other about remembering when John taught them this song and remembering this song and how John showed them this. And we're talking about 50 to 55 years down the line, talking about the impact that he had just coming and doing music weekly, on a weekly basis with them. And I know that's true for the kids that I went to preschool and kindergarten with.